So welcome to the podcast, Andrea. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So excited to talk to you, especially focusing on Hispanics and making sure that we get great advice today.
Yeah. It's a month to celebrate our heritage and something that I've tried to do a little bit in the podcast, kind of throughout the year, kind of keeping that in mind, interviewing Hispanics, and just talking about the struggles that I think a lot of Hispanics really identify with. I know you have had a really successful career, and just wanted to bring you here to the podcast and just to talk about kind of that journey of being a Latina coming to the US and really having a successful business, and I can overcoming those mental challenges that I think all of us face, especially when we're trying to do something big. Do you want to just give us a little background on your experience and kind of things you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, so I'm actually originally from Lima, Peru.
Mhm.
I've lived in the US now for about 20 years, which feels really crazy to say. I used to say I've been here for half my life, and that's no longer true as I get older. But I moved to the US when I was a teenager and right before high school. Really interesting time to move from. I used to go to a private school in South America to I went to a public school in Houston, Texas. So from a class of 20 to a class of 900. Very different. I had to learn to adjust quickly, but there's something about the story of an immigrant where you learn how to adjust and you learn how to overcome change that you do that really flawlessly for the rest of your life. So that's a huge strength that you
Mhm.
gain through those moments in your life. So I finished high school in Houston and I did my bachelor's at Texas Tech University in chemical engineering. Then I started working internationally for an oil field. I started in Brazil, a little bit in Abu Dhabi, and then the majority of my time in Mexico, in Villahermosa, which is, for those maybe not as familiar, I guess if you draw a line from Mexico City to Cancun, and right in the middle, that you have Villahermosa and very isolated areas, but a lot of really great work happening in the oil and gas field. So I worked there for close to 4 years. Then I moved back to the United States. During this time, I got my master's in business and I transitioned my career from what is called like a service side to the operator side. And I started kind of climbing a different ladder. That's really was a big career move for me. I loved it, and I was in Oklahoma City for about 8 years, going from engineer all the way to leading a multi-billion-dollar project in the Northeast with my own team of engineers, and absolutely loved it. During this time, I started my consulting business. I started my consulting business now about 2.5 years ago now, mainly because I saw the strategy that I've implemented in my career that gave me results and I wanted to inject that into more people. So I started that and then it grew to something I never imagined from day one. As much as I have big goals, sometimes you never know how something could really evolve. And I've officially transitioned full time into entrepreneurship 2 months ago. And I already have another idea for a second business
Mhm.
that we're going to be opening up in 22.
Yeah,
That's
and
like
I
my
think
whole
that
life story.
yeah, and I think that's exactly what I want to start is because as Hispanics, I think I've suffered for imposter syndrome and thinking that the things that I'm doing is not enough, and like the just struggling with that those mental barriers that we impose in ourselves. Someone that have a has an engineering background, obviously, engineers are not typically known as introverted and like people that are not really outgoing and just those stereotypes that engineers have. What was that experience at the beginning, trying to start your business in a completely different field, and some of the lessons you learned kind of in those early stages?
That's a really great question because I think, especially as engineers and maybe even as immigrants, we tend to want to wait until we are maybe fully certified in something or feel like we're the experts in something before taking action. And is reminding ourselves that it's okay to go after more certifications,
Mhm.
more degrees, if that's really why you want to do it, but doing it for the right reasons. Not because you think that's the only way that it's going to give you maybe the results that you want. Or if you're doing it simply to push that timeline a little bit further. So one of the things that when I looked at the start of my own business was what can I impact today and with what I know today, and not undermining that the knowledge that I have right now is enough to create the ripple effect that I wanted. In fact, I started my business while I was in maternity leave with my second baby. I have a 4 year old and a 3 year old. I don't do well with not working. If you so maternity leave was great. I spent a lot of time with my babies, but I realized that okay, what can I do to really use this time and fulfill my passions? And that's why I started my business. I find that we have enough knowledge right now to make an impact. And I see it all the time with my clients where I review their resume for the first time and they're telling me the roles that they're applying to. And I'm like, why? Why are you applying to those roles? Those are like parallel moves. What is stopping you? And I think sometimes we forget to do an audit of how far we've come. We're always in that growth mode or trying to go for bigger things that we forget you've already come a very long way.
Yeah, and I guess a follow up to that question is how do we set those goals and look ahead far enough that we're pursuing those like big ambitious goals, and maybe some of the limitations you've seen in your clients on why they're not pursuing bigger goals.
A lot of the times we're stuck in our routines that we
Hmm.
don't take intentional moments to think about what is that next version for us. And I always like to say it's not so much about the goal itself, but is who do you want to be when you are going after those goals? When I think about what kind of coach do I want to be a year from now, I'm thinking how does she show up? What are the things that she does that maybe right now this current version of me is not doing? But it comes with putting time aside every day to think about, am I improving 1%? And if so, is that going to get me closer to my goals? Am the right the When I think about the goals that we want to chase, let's say that you're going after a manager position and that you want to go after that, or you want to become the vice president of your company. Well, what is a version of you doing when they get to that role? How do they show up every day? Because if you start doing that right now, you'll start bridging that gap. So think about what kind of person you want to be, not just today, but 5 years from now. Because I think a lot of times we get caught up with what role do you want to have in 5 years? And a lot of people, I don't even know if this is the right industry for me. Then my question for you is who do you want to be in 5 years? Do you want to be someone with influence? Do you want to be someone leading major projects, maybe in a different industry? And if so, what could you be doing right now to start showing up as that person?
Yeah, I think that's some great advice. I know I personally try to at least assess my like kind of big career goals at least once a year. At the end of the year, I think it's a great time to start looking at the things I want to do, either that specific year or maybe 5, 10 years down the road. And something I want to ask you is, I know in my case, and I know probably other people too, when you're planning, you think your future self is going to have a lot more motivation. Let's say a weekly plan, for example. Next week I'm gonna clean the house. How do you ensure that when that time comes, you're accountable enough to actually pursue that task or that goal, especially when you're thinking about 5, 10 years and all the steps that take to get to that point?
Part of that is, do you trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do? And do
Hmm.
you treat yourself like you would a family member or a friend? Thinking about, let's say, if I tell you, Luis, I'm going to show up for this podcast and then I don't show up, and you say, oh, well, let's reschedule, and we're scheduled for tomorrow, and I don't show up. And then the following day, I don't show up. At some point, you're going to say, I don't think you're reliable. I don't think I trust that you really will show up when you're needed. But we do that to ourselves where we say,
Hmm.
today is the day I'm going to do and go talk to my boss and I'm going to go tell them that these are the things that I'm doing. But then we don't do it. So it really starts with believing and holding yourself accountable that what you say you're going to do, you actually follow through. And I got a question asked actually today about how do I stay motivated? And the truth is, I am not always 100% motivated. Like, that's by no means ever been the case. It's more about creating the dedication that I know that I'm my own best friend. And if I told myself that that was something that was important, I'm going to follow through with it. I tell you, there's times where I'm putting on my workout shoes and the thoughts that are crossing my mind might not be as positive. but I'm still taking the right actions regardless of that. So I think rewriting some of the stories that perhaps we've written, I hear this all the time. I'm just not an organized person. I'm just not someone that really is productive. Well, absolutely. You believe that. So you're not going to be that. How about I am someone that can start getting organized starting today and start showing up and building that confidence. So if you find yourself that you kind of fall through with your plans, or you say, I would love to do all this, but I don't have the right plan, ask yourself, how are you showing up every day and are you following through? Get yourself an accountability person that's going to tell you, I thought this was important to you, Luis. I guess it wasn't that important. Like, who's going
Mhm.
to tell you the truth the days that perhaps you don't want to hear it? We have a lot of friends that want to be our friend, that don't want to tell you maybe when you're falling flat or not following through. So who is going to be that person? Find that person for you if right now you don't feel like it can be, yourself just yet.
Yeah, I think that's super true. I also have two children. I have obviously a full time job during the day. I have volunteer and everything, and then the podcast obviously takes kind of the rest of the time at night. And yeah, a lot of time is not like finding the motivation. It's just putting yourself in the position to start doing the work, and eventually you just get the roll balling, and you find yourself you found the motivation, quote unquote, because motivation is not something you have. It's something you have to put the work into, and just put yourself into the places that you really want to be. A book that really helped me with this was Atomic Habits. It's an amazing book about just developing those habits, starting really small, finding the things that the triggers that you need to accomplish certain tasks. Something I started doing also, just having a calendar or like checklists, and just kind of taking every time I do my morning routine, or like if I'm gonna say I'm gonna read every night or something, just seeing like the pattern. What are some of the things that you do to keep yourself accountable? Do you journal? Do you have some sort of like calendar where you can write an X each day or something like that?
Definitely, I'm very structured in everything that I do. You kind of took me back. A lot of people ask me, how did you build a six-figure business while working full time?
Hmm.
And a lot of times when I answer the question, it's not glamorous. It's, well, every day, Monday through Friday, from 7 till about 9:30 p.m. I worked on my business. On Saturdays and Sundays, from 4 a.m. to 6:30, before my kids woke up, I worked on my business, and then I worked on my business while they were napping. I mean, I have I guess I was lucky enough that, there were one and two and two and three when, most of the work was
Hmm.
happening. A lot of times things are not as glamorous as we want it to be. Hard work does take a lot of dedication. So for me, was being very structured with what are my non-negotiables. And my non-negotiables are, for me, it's time with my family, uninterrupted quality time with my family. So if that's a non-negotiable, then I have to find, when do I work on my business? Because I still have, I can't move my 9 to 5 to the hours that, I would like. So that's a block. That's another non-negotiable. So really mapping out what are the things in your life that are non-negotiables. And especially if you're someone that wears many hats, for the longest time, and I was running operations, and operations are 24/7. So at any point in time, I could get called that, we had a problem going on in one of our sites. So it's about, how many hats are you wearing? How do you want to wear them? And can you show up 100% to everything that you do? But for me, is time blocking, making sure that I'm not creating unrealistic to-do lists. I used to fall trap to that. I used to say, "Wow, tomorrow I'm going to accomplish these 10 things." And I would look at it and I would almost know that that was an impossible day. But I started really gut checking. It's like, okay, what are the really things that I need to do that are going to move the needle forward? So if it doesn't move the needle forward, I say no. And I think being able to say no to things that once upon a time we would have said yes to, and I would say probably even more so for my Hispanic families, where his family responsibilities or even family events, you will hear from your family if you don't show up for, your little cousin's party
Hmm.
on a Saturday. But hey, that Saturday, maybe I was coaching 5 people, and that's part of my business. And I have to put some boundaries. I will make sure they get the gift. I will make sure I show up, whenever it makes sense. But being able to say, this is part of a bigger picture. So just looking at your calendar ahead, my husband and I actually have a routine that we look at our calendars for the next 3 days every night. to make sure that we are in sync with anything that maybe I haven't thought about. I don't like surprises. I don't like be like, oh, I forgot that we had, soccer practice, or that this week we were moving from Tuesday to Wednesday, because that stresses me out, and I don't like to be stressed if I don't have to be. So we look at it as like our family staff meeting every night, but that helps us stay organized. So that's important. Starting the day taking care of myself is important.
Mhm.
I show up better as a mother. I show up better as a coach if I fill my cup first, which for the longest time, I probably would have told you that was not the case. I was probably at the last. I was on empty. Now I focus on I fuel myself first, and then I serve others.
Yeah, I think all those points are crucial. I really like that. One of the last points, just having that connection with whoever you live with, like your partner, even if you live with like other family members or something, like staying on the same page on the calendar. I think that's a super important with meetings and everything, especially if you know you're gonna have a busy week or there's just a lot of things going on that may not be as clear to the other person. We do something similar kind of every Sunday. We just kind of go through the entire week and have like a mini like board meeting, if you will, and we go like through our house duties, whatever's on the calendar, just things that we can do better the week, just some of the week goals, and just review kind of a broad overview of the finances every week. Just kind of it's hard to keep track of all these things every single day, but if you put just 1 or 2 hours a week to get everything together, talk through it together, I think that helps a lot. Communication, again, super key. Every morning, if I know I have two more than like 1 or 2 meetings that are going to be in the middle of the day, that the other person needs to be aware of, watching the kids, or maybe they have also work, just reminding them. I think that's also something that getting the habit of that, especially if you're super busy, has been helpful. And I think that also translates well into like your work. Like for example, if you know you have a busy day ahead, and then your supervisor comes and asks for you to do more work, you need to let them know what you're working on, and having again that constant communication is super key. What are some of
Absolutely.
your tips to students and young professionals that are maybe thinking about like switching jobs or pursuing a promotion at their careers, on how to prepare better to affront those like challenges and pursue those bigger roles?
One of the things that, especially as engineers, we don't really get taught is storytelling.
Mhm.
And storytelling is so important when it comes to going after either a career change or your promotion, because we're very factual. We're say, well, I did the projects. I'm not sure why I have to go back and explain that I did all
Mhm.
those things. It's very clear. I did it. And I think that's the piece I think a lot of times people get hung up on is the expectation that my work should speak for itself. But unfortunately, you have to think about, as busy as you are, think about how busy your supervisor is. And they know who their top performers are, but a lot of the times your wins are silent wins, and they're just assumed that you've handled it. Sometimes they don't know the extent to what you had to do to handle that and get that win. So advocating for your work and not letting it fall in the shadow of assumption is one of the biggest advice I could give. Speak about it. Even if you feel like at first you're bragging, it's about making sure that you're not leaving anything unsaid. Because I think one of the
Mhm.
biggest things I find is, oh, my boss didn't know that I was doing this behind the scenes. Now they're like, oh, well, you could be helping me with this other project. And those conversations are very eye opening to the manager a lot of times, but really to us as the direct reports, that we have to advocate. So no matter what you're doing in your career, whether you're starting out day one, whether you're making a career switch, or you are, going for a promotion, being able to clearly articulate everything you're doing, the behind the scenes, the things that might not show up on your resume are really important. So if we focus solely on promotions, I I love to think that if you are structured throughout the year, the conversation with promotions is more of the stamp that ends the book. If you haven't had any conversations about growth, if you haven't had any conversations about your milestones, your key achievements until you're ready to talk about a promotion, it makes the conversation a little bit less fluid. So I love to
Mhm.
say, let's come up with milestones for the whole quarter and say, and if you know you're due for a promotion, let's say in 6 months, you should be talking about that now, because maybe your idea of what it takes to be an engineer too is very different than your supervisors. So understanding, what does your boss see as the next level for you, and what are they expecting you to be doing right now that proves you're ready for that position. That way, as soon as you get that information from them, you can start creating those cases through the 6 month period or whatever timeline makes sense. And when you have that conversation, you use their words because you know what they value, you know what's important to them, and you present very clearly why you're ready. I all my clients, I make them present essentially like at that point it's like a thesis of everything you've said I needed to do, the projects, here's the milestones, here are the achievements. I wanted to give you this summary as we're wrapping up Q2. I thought this would be important. Can you let me know when we're in the process for a promotion? And every supervisor so far has been, wow, you did my job. You made my job really easy. And that's the point. Yes, I made your job really easy. So when are we getting that promotion? So make the promotion feel like it's a super easy process, because once you do this once, you've kind of trained your supervisor to know, okay, this person is really on top of everything that they need to be doing. If you're looking for a career switch, it is a little bit different. I think at times we have to know what part of our story matters most. And it might not be the part that you value the most. Because especially if you're going to a different industry, what is that industry value? And making sure that you're highlighting those things from your experience. I also like to say a lot of the things we do really well and that we really, it comes natural to us, we take for granted and we assume everyone else does them really well as well. So you probably have a superpower that you're taking as a, oh, doesn't everyone perform well under pressure? No, not really. I've seen people crumble. Or, oh, not everyone can really command presence in a room. What are those things that you do very naturally that you want to highlight for a future opportunity? Like, don't that's another thing that shouldn't be left for assumption.
Yeah, those are some great advice. What comes to mind immediately is, I know for Hispanics, it's just hard to get past that barrier of, like, quote unquote, bragging about ourselves, our achievements, our success, and all of that. Um, what maybe are some ways that we can overcome that mental barrier of, I am not enough. If I get a promotion, it's because maybe they want more diversity in their board team, or some of those like mental barriers that we impose in ourselves.
I said this. I was in a live not that long ago, and I think a lot of the times, and trust me, as someone that checks a lot of boxes, on the diversity side, you always kind of feel like you have to show up 2x or 10x as everyone
Mhm.
else around you to show I didn't become this level because I'm Hispanic and a woman. I became this level because I was the most qualified person to get this role. But also, it comes with me believing that, and I have to believe that I'm the most qualified person for this role. That way, I show up that way every single day. But to your point, I think at times when we're thinking about how can I go past that barrier, it use it as a factual basis. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you just rock this project, and because of the work that you've done, we saved the client $2 million. Okay, great. Be factual about it. You don't even have to say, hey, I saved the day and saved $2 million. You can say, based on the project that I've been leading, these were the results and these are the metrics. We actually thought we weren't going to save any money, but we ended up saving $2 million. I thought this was a really great metric that I wanted to share with you. So now
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying I'm where's my memo with everyone saying
Mhm.
that I saved $2 million, but also your boss can use that as a win for him or her, and those things tend to get shared immediately. I always like to call them shareable content, similar to Instagram. When the algorithm, like, you want people to share your content, you want people to share your email for the right reasons. So if
Right.
you made your boss look like a rock star, guess what, your boss is going to be like, wow, we saved $2 million. I'm going to show my boss, and most likely my boss is going to show my boss. So that way you can essentially brag about yourself, but you're doing it in a factual way.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And yeah, like many people, I've struggled with that a lot, especially when when you get into committees or organizations and you're the only Hispanic in the groups or at a company, that's a lot of time the case. It's just really hard to be vocal about the things we're doing great, and to be vocal about the things that we know we're helping with, but a lot of times it feels like it's not good enough, at least in my mind sometimes. But it's just showing, and again reading the facts and just looking at the numbers to realize that our impact in the company is not just about me being a Latino or someone else being a different ethnicity, but it's about the numbers and the actual work that we're doing at those companies. I think that's a great point, and something that I know a lot of people struggle with, and hopefully these conversations and others are helping with that. Something that I struggle also a lot with is social media, just looking at other people, what they're doing, and sometimes feeling like I'm not doing enough as a Hispanic or as a person in general in the career. Maybe what's your advice for people that are in that same boat, like just looking outside their immediate circle, looking at social media, thinking that everyone just has superpowers and are doing a lot of things, when they feel like they're overwhelmed and tired and maybe not getting enough things out into the public?
I think if you find yourself in that cycle of comparison, I one I would ask what thought is driving that. Because at the end of the day, if you see everyone around you, let's say your inner circle that you graduated with from college, and I see this a lot, which is my immediate five friends who I studied with the 4 years. One of them now just got promoted and is two levels higher than me. And I know for a fact that I was doing his projects back in the day, and you start going back get that route. I would ask you, does that serve you? Does that
Right.
help you show up better because of that? Or are you saying, wow, it's possible. This person's two levels ahead of me. Oh, I'm curious. Is there something maybe I'm missing that I should have leveraged that this person leveraged? So look at it as oh, it's possible. Other people are winning. So guess what? If we're winning, that means that right now there's opportunities. And I saw that a lot, especially in 2020, when I would get a client that come in with a negative mindset of there are no opportunities. And I would be like, I can show you 10 people that have gotten offers in the last week. There are opportunities. So the fact that like there are no opportunities, it's a false statement. And as soon as we start breaking down those statements, I was like, what's real about this is okay, you haven't found the right opportunity, but there are opportunities out there and you can change it and you can affect that. I can tell you, I went down this rabbit trail and I'm going to be very transparent about 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't in comparison to other coaches, but it was I was really stuck on negative news on online. And when you pull on a thread and all of a sudden you're like 10 profiles in and now you're reading the comments, like that's when you know that you've gone too far. It's when you start reading the comments to get your news and see what people are thinking. And it really cost me like a lot of anxiety. I was like, this is not good. And I was working with my coach about this, and it was what about it exactly was causing me is like a lot of felt outside of my control. And I thought I want my kids to grow up in a world that is happy and that it's not going down a very negative way, which it feels like at times it is. And what I took back, I said, I can control the environment that my kids grow up in because at the end of the day, it starts with my husband and myself. And once I focused on that, I was able to kind of let go of all the negative news that I was chasing. But if you go back to comparison or you go back to what other people are doing and you're looking at it and it's making you feel less and less and less, and your focus for the day was to show up 1% better, then it's okay to remove those levers and say, I'm going to love you from afar. I'm going to work on my mindset a little bit and I'll come back and I cheer you on when I'm ready. But I'm going to look at it and say, you're winning. That means winning right now is possible. And especially and I'm not sure if this has happened to you or really anyone, when you see like the, oh, I was this happens a lot in the business coaching world, and I'm just going to preface, but it's more of like 0 to 20K months, right? All these people that do these crazy wins, but they don't tell you the struggle of what happened the first 3 years, that when they were zero for 3 years and then you went to 20. A lot of times we don't know the struggles other people are going through, but we glamorized it as, wow, it seems so easy for you. I wish it was that easy for me. Well, that's a thought. How about it's that easy for you? That means it's possible. That means I can do it as well. There's really no difference between you and I. But you have to gut check. What are you thinking during those moments? And if there's someone that doesn't serve you, I mute a lot of people and I just mute them and I'll come back and celebrate them when I'm ready.
Yeah, I think that that's super super important what you said there. It's all in our minds. I think the more we look outside our inner self, the more we compare ourselves with other people that may seem like they're doing great. Like if you see, I mean, if I look at your Instagram, I will have never thought that you're having these struggles with yourself. And I think it's not. And if you look at my Instagram, it's the same. Like it doesn't seem like I'm having struggles with my career or anything. But when we only take that into consideration and we don't analyze what's going on in our lives, the things that we can do better, and having that mental model of, okay, they're doing great, they are also probably struggling inside, I'm struggling, and seeing that it's possible. And I think that's one of the things that I've been trying to do more, is just sharing more of that struggle with people, because a lot of people have asked me, like, how do you manage to do all of these things and just do it well and not be stressed? I'm like, like behind the camera or behind the scenes, I'm like anxious and stressed and worried about all these things. So he's sharing more of those little stories, showing people that it's not always glamorous. Like you said, there's a lot of struggles that come from having a family, having a full-time job, volunteering, and doing all of these things. But at the end of the day, we just need to take care of ourselves and really stop comparing other people's journey with our journey. Our path is the way it is for a reason. We're on this path because we have other challenges than I have, challenges that you may not have, you have challenges that I may not have. And it's really hard to compare two people on a journey to sharing anything, either online or just pursuing big career goals. I think it's just very difficult to have that comparison.
I
And
agree.
something that, sorry,
I agree.
yeah, and something that I just struggled a lot is just that, like realizing that I don't have 4 or 5 hours a day to work 100% on the podcast. I only have a couple, and that's gonna have to be enough. And if that means I'm not hitting these big goals that other people are hitting, that's okay with me, because I'm doing this so I can have conversations with people like you and others in the podcast that are fun, entertaining, and hopefully people are getting some value out of it. I just want to go back to when you started your business, coming from an engineer field and transition into more business. Those are two completely different careers. And I want to know, what were those mental challenges, those mental barriers that you maybe had before you started your business, and how you overcame them once you actually got your business running and everything was working smoother at the beginning.
Yeah, so what the biggest thing that I had to kind of work through was my money mindset. Here's the thing. I have been coaching and mentoring a lot of people for free for many years before I started my business. So then here I am, and now we're gonna do it. There's gonna be an exchange. Before it was my time for advice, and it's like it feels very giving. And now I'm telling you, hey, there's an invoice that I expect you to pay, and it's in return for my time, because this is a business, and this is, and honestly, something too is like people show up differently when they paid for it versus when it's free. I
Hmm.
see it all the time. That's why I don't do free sessions. I prefer that you spend $5 to ask me a question, because you'll ask me a better question, because you're like, I'll better make this good.
Right.
But that was a big deal, was actually having that exchange, and in a way selling. In a way, I was like, I know I can change your life if we work together. And when it came to telling you how much I wanted to charge you and everything, and you gave me like the first, well, I just don't know if I'm quite ready, I would be like, well, it's fine. We'll do it for free then. It's not a big deal. And I found myself at the beginning sabotaging the fact that it was a business. So what did I do? I hired a business coach to help me with that. And I have a rule: I don't hire anyone to coach me unless they have a coach, because I believe coaches need coaches. So I had an executive coach up until then, and then I hired a business coach, which I still work with my executive coach to this day. I have like three coaches, just so you know, just going to put that out there. I have three coaches. I practice what I preach, which is you need people in your corner that are going to call you out when you're stopping yourself. And I worked with her about why is that? And it was part of it coming from a corporate environment where we don't do that. And in fact, maybe account managers have that skill set because they sell products in their day to day. So they're comfortable with that exchange. I had never really done it, so I wasn't comfortable. It was very outside my comfort zone. So I had to learn how to sell in a way that it felt good to me,
Mhm.
because there's a lot of advice online. And something I will tell you is there's some ways that people sell that I just cannot. I don't feel good about it. It doesn't feel authentic. And then it made me not like my business. So what I did is really found, how does it work for me? And it's okay to grab advice from other people, but then find what works for you so you show up authentically. That was the key. And then all of a sudden from there, it wasn't necessarily that, because I will tell you, one of the things she told me was, why are you not giving people the benefit of the doubt that they can be resourceful and invest in themselves just like you invest in yourself by working with me? Why are you taking that away from them? And that really hit me as, okay, I shouldn't make that decision. I'm going to let them make that decision, because I know I showed up differently when I invested in myself. So that was a big one. And really getting organized. I actually ended up hiring a team as I was growing. So all the money that I was making, I was reinvesting it in my business, because I always told myself I didn't want to be tied to it where all I did was work my business. So I have a business manager that I hired on from day one. Even when I wasn't making any money, I said, okay, you have trouble selling. Guess what? We're gonna make an outward investment every month that you're gonna have to at least break even on. So I kind of put myself in a place where I couldn't not sell anymore. I had to start making money. I hired her. She's been with me from day one. And then I started giving her tasks, and I leveraged my corporate environment of being a leader and knowing how to delegate, knowing how to influence, knowing how to motivate. This was the first person that had ever kind of reported to me that didn't really report to me through an organizational structure of a company. And the fact that she's been with me since day one, to me, is one of my best accomplishments, that I've kept her so engaged with my business this long. So I kind of learned how to tap into the influence that you gain leading projects, getting organized, having metrics. I mean, I pretended I was a Fortune 3 company giving earnings releases every quarter. Like I treated it that way. And once I switched that mindset, I realized that I had something really big in there. And then it grew to the point that I had to make a decision if I continued in my corporate job or if I went all in.
Yeah, it's super important. I think that that mindset of delegation, it's a hard one to overcome, especially as someone that is starting to build something. It's just hard to let go of like the things you're building and managing. But at the same time, you're finding people that are better at other things, and finding people that you can rely on, and as well as freeing your time to work on the things you're more passionate about and things that you're more knowledgeable about. That's something I also realized maybe 6 months ago when I was really overwhelmed just with the podcast and everything. It's just finding places, and doesn't need to be hiring a manager for your personal life or something like that, something crazy like that. Just finding people that are key to help you in certain things. Like for me, like editing this podcast, it takes 1 2 hours a week that I can get back and maybe plan better podcasts, recruit and book better guests that at the beginning I didn't really have. It's just a small investment that really helps me free up some time and do the things I really love. So I just have one last question, and I think as we progress as Hispanics in engineering, in STEM, some people pursue careers in business like you that have their own businesses. What are some of the things you've seen us as Hispanics struggle the most that we need to work towards to fix that mindset of I'm not enough. I come from a different background that is not really going to be seen well in, let's say, here in the US. What are some things that you've seen as a whole? Obviously, that's kind of a stereotype, but as a whole, what are some things that you've seen Hispanics do that are preventing them to get to the next level?
I definitely answer that more from kind of what I've seen or my perspective, even my own experiences. I in general, and this might be more of a very like South America culture,
Mhm.
which is you are regarded for living a certain lifestyle a little bit more than others. So what car do you drive? Like that's you show up in a Mercedes and all of a sudden they're like, oh wow, she is doing like she's doing good. She's and
Mhm.
you might be broke and you might have no food at your house, but you showed up in the Mercedes, right? And I think a lot of times, like letting go of some of those things that we perceive as status in our culture. And again, that's more of like what I've seen with maybe a particular geographical area to South America, but letting go of some of those things and understanding what are the right investments I need to be doing so I can really be financially secure long term. And yeah, it might mean that for the first 2 years out of college, I'm not trading in my car that is paid off, but I'm going to start saving money to maybe not have a car payment, and I'm going to really set myself up for long-term success, even though maybe my family expects me to living up in a little different lifestyle. That's where your cousin is doing over there, and
Mhm.
they're the successful cousin because they're showing up those things. I think that's a big one. I think in general is like being aware of what are the cultural things that are kind of engraved in us that perhaps you hear it often that you're like, yeah, but that doesn't really serve me for my goals. And being okay with slowly breaking away from some of those things that don't really serve you. I had a joke that I was kind of joking with my mom, and we were talking that you could have a picture of your PhD, and that you're like, I just finished my PhD, but sometimes if you're maybe not looking a certain way, they'd be like, oh gosh, they don't look very good, and they completely disregard the PhD, and it's like that it's really being like what do you value and it being okay if it's a little bit different than what generations prior to you valued, and that's okay. Another thing is especially once you build a career and let's say you do decide that you want to go build a business and it's different than your career in engineering, and everyone is so proud of your engineering career and you've realized there's something bigger for you, something else is calling you, is that your identity is so much greater than your what you studied in school. You are gaining skill sets along the way, but if something else is calling you, listen to that. And you'll always be an engineer, no matter what. No one can take that away from you. But I think there's that detachment from engineering, if like making taking a different path altogether, it can it can be hard because your family perceives that as successful as well. So I just think depending on what kind of environment you lived, what do they like, what kind of cultural values you've seen that you want to take on, but also what do you this is an opportunity to rewrite that story and like what am I willing to let go and not take on for maybe future generations. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I mean, I'm from Colombia, so like nearby to Peru, and I think that's something that I also see quite a bit, especially when I look back at my friends like over in Colombia or some people that have moved to the US. Is just our regards to the material things, like showing ourselves as someone that we may want to be, but we're not. I think that's something that it takes some hard work and some mindset shifting to realize that the things we have are not really the things that we are. It's just the things that we have, and that are not. We need to present ourselves as more authentic, I think, sometimes, and trying to impress other people. So I totally relate with that, and I think that's some great advice. Do you have any last words of advice for any Hispanics or anyone that may be listening to this?
One thing when we were talking about earlier, there's two thoughts. One was we talked about talking about the what when we talked about the scheduling with your partner and
Mhm.
everything, but also talking about the why behind what we do. So I had to really educate my husband on posting on social media or like posting on stories. Why is that important? It's taking away from us time. And the moment I realized I wasn't really explaining what type of results come from some of the activities that I was putting on the calendar, and being able to share the wins with those that support you and say, look, because I posted on this, look, I got a lead and this is my client. And then, hey, these are the results my clients are having. Sharing that part of the story with
Mhm.
those around you that you want their support can be so critical because at times all they see is you're left to go work on something for an hour, but they don't know the impact that it have unless you share it. So share that with the people closest to you so they understand what they're supporting. And then if we think about to the point of hiring other people to do certain things and really free up time, I mean, if you look at all the CEOs that are in corporations, not you will not find one or I say never, but the odds of you finding a CEO that's done everything from accounting to legal to maybe health and safety to operations, you really don't find that. What you find is someone that can connect dots and can say, listen, I might not be the expert, but I can bring the expert in the room. So if you have ideas, bring the expert in the room. You don't have to know it all. The best leaders are the conduits for other people to work together. So even if at the beginning, when you don't feel like you're qualified, you are qualified to find who the right person is to help you. And if you lean on that, you will be successful.
Yeah, it takes a lot of skill to both realize that and find the right people to help you in those challenges. I think those two are some great advice. A book that comes to mind is Start with Why. I think it's an amazing book that really resonated with me and kind of goes along the lines that you just described. Um, that I have what this is the last question I have for you, and I ask it on every episode. I'm always amazed by the questions, the responses I get, and it's how can we continue engineering our future?
How can we continue engineering our
Hmm.
future? You know, I look at as what have I learned in my career as an engineer, and it's been being able to solve problems, being able to innovate, being able to be resourceful. I think if you've learned anything through engineering is to be resourceful. I will always joke. I find that you find people finding things online that they found the answers to a book because they went through five different, postings on one website. And people, we're resourceful. And I think as long as we like, at the end of the day, what does it make us, and at our core, as engineering our future, is innovation and it's being resourceful. So if we can stick to that, you never really let go of engineering, whether you move on to manager roles or even switch industries later on.
Yeah, that's a wonderful response. Thanks so much, Andrea, for coming to this podcast, for sharing all your knowledge. Where can people find you online, connect with you, and just reach out to you?
Absolutely. So I spend a lot of time on Instagram at miss.andrea.martin. And if you message me on there, I like to do a homework for my on my podcast, which is send me a takeaway from this episode. I would love to hear you send a takeaway, tag both of us, and share it on your stories. And then you can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Andrea Martin MBA.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for coming to the podcast, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.